Iniciaremos agora a terceira conferência do BRICS no século XXI, com o tema Mega Tendências do campo científico e tecnológico. A comissão gostaria de agradecer mais uma vez aos patrocinadores, em nome do BNDES, da Caixa, do Ministério do Planejamento, do Governo Federal, da Odebrecht e da Sinergia. Gostaria de convidar agora o professor Luiz Pinguelli Rosa para compor a mesa. Gostaria de convidar também Helena Brizgalina, da Rússia. Mari Cherry, da África do Sul. Professor Jin Chun-tan, da China. E Luiz Antônio Elias, que será nosso moderador.
Boa tarde a todos e todas. Eu queria inicialmente parabenizar os organizadores do evento, especialmente o Zé Carlos Assis, pelo esforço que fez para mobilizar um conjunto de atores, especialmente pesquisadores e expertos na área do tema dos BRICS. É um tema relevante para os países, especialmente para aqueles que compõem o BRICS, mas especialmente para nós da América Latina, e em seguida vou colocar o motivo, porque eu acho que essa questão. Mas eu acho que ele acertou na organização do evento, e discutimos muitas vezes, quando esteve comigo no Ministério da Ciência, Tecnologia e Inovação, pensando a dimensão e o alcance que deveria ter esse programa e os temas que deveriam ser abordados. Nesta mesa, procuraremos interpretar, ou pelo menos observar, trazer algumas polemizações e debates sobre as questões relacionadas ao crescimento dos países e a situação que se encontram hoje, frente a que para muitos é uma crise internacional, ainda por se definir mais especificamente do longo prazo, mas a percepção que temos é que se a solução do crescimento não vier acompanhada, como diz os documentos da CEPAL, de um processo de igualdade, no qual possamos recuperar a capacidade não só de crescimento, mas corrigir as assimetrias internas, na verdade, nós estaremos de novo num processo de concentração de capital e de um retorno a um modelo que não nos é útil com perspectiva de crescimento e de igualdade. Mais ainda, quando a questão tecnológica se torna uma corrida efetiva e empreendedora por esse país, especialmente pelas empresas, e mais uma vez se quer fazer uma revisão do Tratado Internacional de Propriedade Intelectual. Ou seja, os países caminham não só para rediscutir as questões relacionadas ao GATT ou à área de serviços, e novo rediscutir a questão do tema da propriedade industrial. Isso assim um processo de concorrência e de concentração muito forte e traz sérias consequências. Mas eu não vou me delongar nesse primeiro momento, apenas queria reforçar, Zé Carlos, a importância da organização desse evento para todos nós, no momento atual que o Brasil vive, inclusive às vésperas de uma eleição. Creio que as consequências desse seminário serão certamente muito úteis para o governo, para os candidatos no processo democrático, para que possam se nutrir da percepção do que ocorre a nível internacional e de como podemos traçar linhas de políticas que efetivamente nos levem a um patamar de crescimento mais forte, com tecnologia, com capacidade industrial, com capacidade de resposta à questão internacional e especialmente com capacidade de resposta à correção das nossas assimetrias internas. Passo primeiro, não combinamos isso aqui à mesa, mas eu passo primeiro a doutora Helena Brizgalina, da Rússia, e ela me solicitou um pouquinho mais de tempo. Eu serei gentil na questão do tempo, para com os outros homens não. mas com ela certamente deixarei um pouquinho mais de tempo para que possa fazer a sua exposição. Por favor.
Thanks. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you for coming. In my presentation, I am going to be talking about social and philosophical problems of human genetics. So I begin with observation about new branch of science, bioethics. And then I go on to discuss in more depth the perspectives of human genetics and government responsibility to deal with new challenge. Nowadays, the traditional norms of human relationships are challenged by the rapid development of biomedical sciences. Therefore, the perspective of genetic knowledge application are to be discussed in terms of possible social and philosophical problems. These problems are analyzed with the scope of bioethics, a new branch of science. According to Potter, bioethics is aimed at systematic investigation of moral principles of biological and medical science achievements. We live in the knowledge society where scientific knowledge is considered as the truth, which humanity can make practical use of. Some may argue that the knowledge that humanity has got about genome is a blessing, while the way we apply genetic technologies should be subject to ethical evaluation. I proceed from the assumption that each type as well as each stage of genetic investigation is to be discussed from two viewpoints, ethical and possible social consequences. In this case, the ethics of science can bridge the utility of scientific discoveries and potential threat they can pose to the society at large. No doubt, the development of genetic and practical application of the results of its development are regulated by legislative and ethical norms. The Russian philosopher, the famous Russian philosopher, Vladimir Solovyov, made a conclusion that law and morals are different regulators because of the following reasons, which you can see on the screen. The problem is that law lacks the development of biomedical practices, which need legislative regulation. The history knows the examples of legally justified anti-human methods to get and apply scientific knowledge. For example, fascist Germany. It means that in our complex world, the law is not a universal regulator of human relations. With the development of genetics, this role would be more increasingly played by ethics. At the same time, within ethics itself, we will witness the increasing contradictions between two approaches to the problems of human genetics. Let's look at them in more depth. I'll start with a liberal approach based on pragmatism. By pragmatism, I understand the social stereotype of behavior which justified any behavior aimed at satisfying one's own needs at the expense of other people's interests. This concept easily explains market relationships under capitalism, since the potential of genetic knowledge application in genetic diagnostics, therapy, and biotechnology is great. They consider law and ethics as an obstacle for the scientific progress. Nowadays, modern genetics, medicine, and pharmacy follow market rules and commodity money relations. Thus, business corporations involved in sequencing and mapping of human genome lobby patenting of genes. let me ask you, do they patent medicine formula in pharmaceutical? Of course. Should patent protect copyright in technology? Oh, of course it should. Since patent protects copyright and guarantees profit, it can be considered as market equivalent of knowledge. Just imagine what if in the same way they will patent the text of DNA to rain fantastic profit for patents holder. Any arguments of business corporation which invest in such project to profit will be pragmatic. This, I think, is the road to the dead end, because in this case, man is considered as commodity. Therefore, a liberal approach is not the only one. From Hippocrates to Kant, duty of a doctor has been to sacrifice self-interest from the sake of his patient benefit. This conservative approach is based on the traditional ethics. Conservative approach is supported by jurists, philosophers, theologians who believe that genetic knowledge application is to be controlled by the society. It means that science are responsible for the consequences of genetic knowledge application. Genetic knowledge can be powerful influence for good. Also, it can get humanity in a lot of troubles. Therefore, advocates of this approach are concerned about unpredictable risks. They stress that manipulation with genes for commercial purposes may open the gate for discrimination by genetic reasons. According to them, the consequences of intrusion in genome are more dangerous than war, ecological, industrial, and natural calamities. They oppose patenting of gene information because a person can be a proprietor of his invention. For example, a new medicine formula. Such is the result of his labor. The text of primary sequence of human DNA is just decoded by a researcher, not created by him, and thus cannot be patented. Moreover, commercialization of human genetics threatens fundamental values. With the development of science, the conflict between the above approaches, commercial interests and traditional ethics, will accelerate in BRICS countries, I think, around the globe. Bioethics may be the forum to discuss the acute problems of human genetics, which will enhance the trust in genetic knowledge. Question arises, how can this dialogue be conducted, given that a genetic and a patient have different competences? I believe the patient-oriented dialogue should be conducted in common language, which patient can understand. In case of diagnostic investigation, for example screening, specialist genetic would explain his patient the aims, method, side effects, results, and possible risks. In the dialogue, the emotion of individual and his system of value should be treated with due respect. The understanding of this would allow avoid primitive, true, false, or right, wrong evaluation. Let's consider a bioethic dilemma in abortion because of abnormal fetus development. Who do you think should decide in this case? It would be mother or a doctor. I am far from thinking that this dilemma has a universal solution. In different countries, the approach to this problem is different. The best way out is to allow a pregnant woman or a couple to make their own choice based on the understanding of situation and patient-oriented information provided by these doctors. It's a woman, not a doctor, who bears responsibility for social adaptation of her would-be child and his sufferings. Also, women should take into account possible pressure from society, her family, and religious matters. Whatever the choice, no one has the right to blame pregnant women concerned of refusal of abortion. Another reason society should respect women's choice, and that diagnostic technologies are far from perfect, and the risk of possible diagnostic mistake is extremely high. Another example for discussion is screening. Should it be voluntary or obligatory? The good thing about genetic screening is that it helps clients make a right decision about their future. At the same, people may have reservation about screening. We know that even in case of voluntary screening, individuals refuse DNA tests, especially when proof of hereditary disease is very high. Here again, no one is allowed to force a person to decide his future. Individuals is free to make his choice based on his viewpoints, system of values, and religion. In the future, we will witness the increase of voluntary screening tendency against growing contradiction of interests of government and individual. The former favors mass screening, while the latter has the right to refuse. This refusal from screening should be treated with due respect by government and society. These examples demonstrate that with the development of human genetics, the responsibility shifts from government and medical to individual. The logic behind this is the following. Human suffering is twofold, biological and biographic. A biologist or a doctor is competent in assisting patient health from physiological point of view, yet he is not knowledgeable in private life or religion's views of his patient. In the same way, patient is not competent enough to interpret the result of medical investigation. This, on the one hand, makes them equal partners in professional, non-professional dialogue. And on the other hand, its inherent trust of society to doctors. It follows that bioethics as practical intellectual activities can assist individual and humanity to make the right choice in the situation critical for survival. All the above brings us to the discussion of the responsibility on the government and society sides. In my opinion, in the nearest future, governments of BRICS countries, regardless, will face, among other things, two crucial issues. The first is fair distribution of resource and health services. Secondly, governments will have to decide on criteria to allow access to high technology medical assistance based on genetic technologies. The government will have to tackle the problem which you can see on the screen. For example, nowadays, in many countries, the screening of newborn child to disclose the diseases which can be viewed as commonplace or routine procedure. And the parents' arguments is not needed. The main purpose of the obligatory screening of newborns is to disclose disease and provide early treatment for the cycle of the child. Parents are provided with information about such programs. If they are against their child testing, well, in the interest of the baby, their legal action against parents are governmentally approved. The diagnostic screening of newborns and timely treatment in case of disease should be both obligatory and free of charge. I'm talking about testing aimed at disclosing diseases which allow the create quality condition for genome realization. Prenatal diagnostics is morally justified if it is aimed at to prepare parents for a sick childbirth instead of killing sick fetus. Actually, lots of genetic diseases are not lethal. For example, people do not die from the Down syndrome. In average, they live about 26 years long and lead full value life in the case of adequate prenatal and postnatal medical treatment. It follows that another duty of governments is to outlaw discrimination against people with a different genotype. Thus, introduction to early screening for some diseases, government has moral and ethics duty to provide available and timely treatment for all patients who need this treatment. If the government cannot do this, the obligatory screening test should be not introduced. I'd like to stress that purpose of genetic screening is not necessary to prevent any disease. Its aim is to allow the test to make his or her decision on reproductive behavior and prepare for potential change in future life. In post-industrial countries, with highly developed science and medicine, the gene technology are available, which is quite positive and optimistic. At the same time, there is a grave concern that the leaders in gene technologies will impose their standards in decision-making, especially in such spheres as law and ethics. For a while, you know that golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules. The uneven development of gene technology on a global scale, not dangerous consequences. The availability of gene technologies to the rich countries and people only will increase inequality and can consequently change the entire gene pool of humanity. It may not only create conditions for multi-directional selection from different groups of people, but also isolate valid and invalid pools of genes. At worst, the integrity of Homo sapiens as biological species will be threatened. Development of methods to treat diseases lacks the development of science. The individual symptoms of the diagnosed diseases can or cannot prove in no course of time. Some countries may lack resources to provide quality conditions for genome realization. Thus, question arises: if society and state cannot help patient to cure his disease, or his disease is of probable character, does he need genetic information about himself? This is a very acute matter, because in the future, the number of people which guarantees access to genetic data will grow. Moreover, genetic screening tests will generate new genetic patterns. The duty of the government is to provide confidential storage of genetic data and carefully select people whom to grant the access. Also, government should regulate the usage of genetic information for diagnostics and research purposes. We must admit that in nearest future, more genetic mutations in DNA will be identified. This will inevitably escalate the interest of employer, political experts, medical insurance companies in genetic information of individuals for genetic stratification of people. Great Britain is the case in point. They allowed genetic screening on the high professional risks. There is highly threatening tendency, since the borderline between genetic screening for scientific and health reasons and genetic discrimination is extremely thin. Nowadays, we witness the diminishing role of government in education, social, public, and human health. As a result, we cut on the investments in these spheres. In these conditions for discussion of problems linked to genetics, such as national biosecurity, accessibility of medical support, and so on, is the battlefield for the political discussions. Attention of politicians to these matters will grow on a par with their aspiration to defend human rights in such spheres as everyday medical praxis and biomedical experiments. No doubt, government of our countries should support and develop genetic technologies, but their responsibility also is to provide the best conditions for such knowledge implementation. Another duty of government is to guarantee the protection of scientific data from the third-party intrusion. The role of genetics is steadily growing around the world. We live in a global village in where people belong to different social strata, express different viewpoints, and have different value systems. People are divided by different religions and cultural traditions. Yet, they are united by internal ethics values, such as human dignity, mercy, concern, sympathy, survival. Ancient Sparta and fascist Germany are the vivid example demonstrating then a renunciation of moral and ethics will inevitably lead to the decline and fall of society and state. We inherit genetics from our parents. Also, we inherit culture from previous generations. We can identify any gene mutation, and we must learn to identify any mutation in ethics. Bioethics provide us with knowledge now to survival in a constantly mutating world. Thank you for your attention.
Queria agradecer muito a professora Helena Isgamina e passo agora ao senhor Mário Chefe. Tá, professor.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank, first of all, before I start, COPE and Intersul for conceiving of this and organizing this wonderful conference. Also the other institutional representatives who are here for this conference. I'd also like to thank the students who are here, especially those from the University of Paraíba, who I learned yesterday have traveled an incredible distance to be here. So I hope that this has proved fruitful and interesting to you. The basic question that I want to address is something that we've been addressing throughout this conference in one way or another. This new, strange formation that we're calling the BRICS, which we're still trying to understand what it is. We're still trying to come to terms with what it is. To what extent is it going to break away with the evolution of global capitalism, especially in its recent mutation as a rather extreme form of neoliberalism? Will it create a rupture? Does it have the conditions for creating a rupture? A lot of people would say that the formation is still much too young for us to be able to assess that, but we can consider possibilities. One way of considering possibilities is, in a way, through looking at history, at the evolution of the member countries before the notion of BRICS, and of the manifestation of these countries' evolving systems of innovation since they are part of this formation. Now, the framework that I'm using here is the National Systems of Innovation Framework. Interpreted in a number of ways. The common default interpretation of the National System of Innovation usually boils it down more to a system of science and technology. It focuses on technological innovations. It looks at the relationship between science and technology subsector and a production subsector. There's a diagram, which I'm not using here because I've used it too often, which was developed by José Casiolato and Helena Lastres, which illustrates this very nicely. It places the narrow version of the National System of Innovation as a subsector within an economy. And this is very much its usage in mainstream economics also, where this is seen as part of the general economy. A broader version, which is based more on a political economy approach, is based on an interpretation of innovation which goes considerably beyond science and technology, where it considers as innovation any alteration in the way we organize economic activity which is deemed to be superior to a previous organization. And it can be non-technological. If we find out that it's better communicating between us to go outside and ditch all this technology, and it works, that's an innovation which has dispensed with technology. So we're introducing now organizational, institutional change as innovations. Now, this is perhaps crucial in understanding how we've come to where we are in the world right now. This world of neoliberalized globalization. When we talk about globalization, what is quoted as having brought in globalization is often down to technology. The effect of ICT in collapsing time and space and communication and transmission of knowledge. The massive drop in transport costs, short batch production to order. For us, for people who look at the historical development of political economy, While these factors may have been facilitators, they did not determine the type of globalized world we live in. The rupture really came with the breakup of the Soviet Union. In fact, of the 5 countries within the BRICS, in their previous incarnation, before the BRICS, if we're looking at the evolution of the global economy or global capitalism over the 20th century, the most important player was the Soviet Union over its odd 70 years of existence. For the first and perhaps the only time in history, it brought in a bifurcation, a forking out of modes of production. In this presentation, I'm using a slight alteration of that, a slight variation of that. I'm talking about modes of innovation, and I'll explain shortly why. But for the first and only time in the development of global capitalism, there were 2 alternatives, not theoretical, but in practice, extending over virtually 50% division of the world in terms of influence. As long as the Soviet Union existed, whatever its demerits, whatever mistakes were made, realpolitik would have prevented our descent into what I would see as an incredibly barbaric type of capitalism that we're experiencing now. Whatever the vaporings of a Milton Friedman or a Margaret Thatcher, Western capitalist economies would not have risked compromising or threatening the quality of life, the conditions of existence of the population, in the way in which they are threatened now, if there was always such a living alternative in the world. The collapse of the Soviet Union, also because of a terrible logical non sequitur, seemed to dismiss any economic theory apart from neoliberal economics to the lunatic fringe, mostly in little pockets in universities. It discredited Marxist economics for a long time. It took it out of the sphere of policymakers. Quite a bit has changed since then. But we talk about the failure of neoliberalism. And the failure is obvious in the crisis we have now, which is a global crisis. But I think we should be a bit more worried about the success of neoliberalism. Its success in actually altering the basic accepted tenets of the economic mainstream. The implicit assumption in all spheres of government, any government, that the market is always more efficient. The acceptance of this kind of market supremacy, which even in the heartland of Western capitalism would, up until the late 70s, have been unthinkable. Until the late 70s, there was no way that prices of staple foods, wages and incomes, would have been allowed to fluctuate in the way they are now. The unregulated financial markets would never have been even considered up to the late 70s. So this, I think, is what we need to tackle. It's not neoliberalism in itself. That's simply a manifestation which might be diluted in the face of the ongoing recession, double dip recession, so on and so forth. It will be even further diluted by examples of some of the BRICS countries, not all of them, right? By the way, they do manage to tackle the tension between growth and social costs. But we are still within a global mode, global capitalist mode of innovation. Now, why a mode of innovation? Well, basically, this is where we're coming from, so it colors our script. It's based on perhaps a reassessment of a theory of value which focuses on knowledge and innovation and historical streams of innovation as determining the value of production. Right? We do not look at, or I do not look at, the distinction between, for example, manual and mental labor, cognitive and other labor, as that valid. I think it might be even a dangerous distraction. I cannot conceive of labor as being other than cognitive. Even labor which is not formally schooled has, through practice, through transmission of knowledge, learned her skills. So all labor is actually knowledge labor. All economies are knowledge economies. So that's why even when we talk about the transition to the knowledge economy, that's a misnomer. By definition, human society engaged in producing something is by definition a knowledge economy. Rather, let's talk about, using Lundvall's terms, a learning economy. If this is the basis of our approach, then we can conceive of modes of innovation defined or captured according to sets of characteristics. And this is a abridged extract from a bit of Borda's Creed. Abridged to make it a bit more easy to talk to in a short presentation. Abridged also to be able to fit in a screen. Okay, so there's a very pragmatic consideration to this. And the two I'm looking at, though I'm assuming a previous one, is the two prevalent modes of innovation over the 20th and now 21st century. Right? We know. Okay, what we're looking at is characteristics categories in terms of ownership and control over the means of innovation. And here the primary means of innovation is labor. And all labor we're considering immaterial. The nature of technological change, the human capabilities required within this mode of innovation, and labor and capital power relationships. Most of these characteristics are well known. As I said, the major rupture, the major breakthrough came with the collapse of Keynesian policy and Keynesian economics around the end of the 70s. In a way, the rise of Thatcherism, not Reaganomics. Reagan talked a lot, but he pushed the American economy into growth rates with the highest deficit spending up to then on things like Star Wars and all that. Maggie Thatcher was true to her world. I mean, in her obsession with an extreme form of free market fundamentalism, she stripped the British manufacturing sector, which had taken a couple of centuries to build up. She tried to turn all British citizens into owners, declared there was no society, just collections of individuals, and believing in or taking on the human, in a classical human capital version of Schultz, Becker, and Friedman. And she said there's no more workers, basically. We're all capitalists now because we own our human capital, which we rent out on the market. So we are talking about Thatcherism. So that was the rift. If the Soviet Union had not collapsed, that experiment, what we call Thatcherism, would probably have been limited to that island. It would not have spread to Europe. In fact, Europe was incredibly resistant and scornful of that experiment. But as I said, because of that logical non sequitur, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the terrible way in which it collapsed, the fear which that collapse put into the People's Republic of China, which was terrified that what could happen, changed the world economic order, perhaps irretrievably. What we had, what we have now in this post-industrial mode of innovation, the age of what Antonio Negri, unfortunately borrowing from Peter Drucker, called the cognitariat, is transnational corporations having more power than most economies, more wealth than most economies, but because of global regulation, unaccountable in a way that nation states are not accountable. We have a global sourcing of not just resources, but of people. So suddenly we can move batches of workers across the world. Suddenly we've shifted the power relation between labor and capital irretrievably. And, for example, the conditions of labor have deteriorated to the point where we might as well be talking about Victorian times. In Britain now we've got 0-hour labor contracts. 120 odd years of organized labor action has been wiped out. There's been a massive regression. We've got precarious life as the norm. Not that the precarious life did not exist across a substantial part of the planet, especially in the developing world, but the fact that there was secure life protected by welfare states in a large part of the world, on both sides of the ideological divide, meant that there was always an ideal to aspire for. That ideal has gone. We have also shifted the burden of human capabilities production onto the private individual. Andre Gortz called this the labor's constant effort to produce oneself. Life has become as work. This was already coined by the operaist movement in Italy in the 60s, where they conceived of the world as a factory, but now it's been enacted in policy. So, this is the framework within which I think we have to start looking at the location of the BRICS. The world is one where the post-industrial mode of production is becoming more and more prevalent. Different modes of innovation. Different modes of innovation obviously exist at the same time in specific national systems of innovation. Now, let's look a bit at the BRICS economies. Okay, the historical role of the BRICS economies. This is an odd bunch. I mean, we've got a grouping of two ex-imperial powers, Tsarist Russia and Imperial China, in their previous incarnation, and three ex-colonies, formed by the imagination of an outsider. As I said, the Soviet Union was critical in historically opening up a fork, an alternative, and then in closing it. Brazil, we know its history as the nexus of Latin American development economics, an alternative account of development, which kept the flame alive even when development economics was exiled into the hinterland of mainstream economics. India provided a case over many decades of, in a way, lists in infant industry argument. Sanjay Lal documents quite well how protectionism allowed for technological development in India. With reservations, of course. It's also allowed for inefficiencies to grow. It also allowed for collusion, also allowed for rent seeking. And he also mentioned that beyond a certain point, it became counterproductive, but it did give that gap for India's science technology sector to grow dramatically, which, with opening up, gave it considerable competitive edge on the world economy. South Africa is a strange creature. the post-colonial history in South Africa really started with the formation of the Union in 1910. It was a very strange colonial history with a dominion status granted to a small white minority with the majority still in a state of oppression. What is not so well acknowledged in South African history, that its relatively massive drive towards industrialization under a minority Afrikaner pact government was driven by the state. The setting up of the Industrial and Steel Corporation was by the state after it had offered incredible incentives to the private sector because of its setting up of railway system and its massive deposits of pig iron. When the bill was passed in 1926, the pact government was called Bolshevist. The engineer of South Africa's massive nationwide industrialization program had the Soviet 5-year plan as his model. This is an era where, according to popular account, you had the prevalence of capitalism. Well, that capitalism might have come about, but it was state engineered. It was a country which, when apartheid came in at the start of the post-colonial era in most of the rest of the world. And by the logic of apartheid, while science and technology progressed because of military spending, the national system of innovation, especially the broad-based human capabilities base, deteriorated considerably. So while the rest of the world was moving towards a mode of production and innovation which relied increasingly on constant upgrading of the quality of labor, South Africa regressed. South Africa became a democracy in 1994, a very unfortunate year. 1994 was the apex of neoliberal hegemony. 1994, there was not even a questioning of the truth base of neoliberal economics. This constrained South Africans' policy options considerably. It was also a very seductive proposition. A new government faced with a mammoth task of altering, turning that ocean liner around, was told by the World Bank and the IMF that they did not need to worry. There are economic laws, almost like the laws of physics, which if they liberalize the market, well, hey presto, the ills of apartheid would be wiped away because they were always inefficient. This generated quite a neoliberal macroeconomic plan, and we're still living with the consequences of it. The consequences were that it entrenched and legitimized the national system of innovation, which was developed under apartheid. A national system of innovation which, while it enables South Africa to win probably the most advanced astronomical observatory in the world, the Square Kilometre Array, has a highly de-skilled population, high structural unemployment, and locked in to the mineral energies complex, which has been its bane from its inception.
Ms. Cherry, 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so if we come down to it, if we're judging the BRICS, apart from the fact that they're huge, well, except for one of them, apart from the fact, but if I get a chance I'll talk about it, apart from the fact that they're huge, apart from the fact that they're the new kids on the block, they're not the usual suspects, and that's very welcome. Apart from the fact, which is also important, that at least now we're having a new emerging global economic power base, which regardless of its flavor, the fact that we do not have a monolithic power base is also important. Apart from that, are we do we have the possibility of engendering a badly needed rupture? Not in neoliberal global economy, but in a capitalist, post-industrial capitalist mode of innovation. Okay, if we look at the narrow version of the systems of innovation, breaking it down to science, technology, innovation. If we look at these 5 countries in terms of their gross expenditure on R&D as a percentage of GDP, one of the commonly used measures of the technological health of these countries, well, compared with the EU average, they're not doing bad. If you look at Brazil and China, you will see a nice increase in this ratio over the years. Okay? I'm going to go through this quickly. I don't like using knowledge economy index and knowledge indices. They're incredibly biased towards business perception. But used just with these 5 countries, we can look at a comparison between them. And one interesting, apart from the fact that this, they indicate the ranking of the countries, is that South Africa is quite high, in spite of its low R&D over GDP ratio. But if we break it down, we know that unlike the other countries, it scores enormously high on the economic incentive regime, how friendly it is to entrepreneurship. So South Africa, in a way, amongst all these 5 countries, has the most market-friendly, market-open economy among the 5. Again, the result of the neoliberal ideology underpinning its macroeconomic planning. Still almost an insistence on virtually minimal government, except in a regulatory manner, so on and so forth. If we look at high technology exports, we can rank these countries, and here, China is the phenomenon. Not because of its size, that we know, we don't have to keep talking about China's size, it's gigantic. Not because it exports a huge amount, which is a problem as it's realizing because it's overly export-oriented. But because over the years, the R&D or the technology intensity of its exports, regardless of the volume, has been increasing at a more rapid rate than the rest of the BRICS. Okay, let's now look at the broad version. And for the broad version, I'm considering 2 factors, both related to the human condition of life, inequality and the HDI. But why am I considering this here? Because from systems of innovation perspective, we consider the quality of life, the material conditions of life, not as an objective of policy only, right? Because there, nobody would disagree that we want to uplift the quality of life of populations. Even the most extreme neoliberal economist would say this is the way to raise the quality of life of people. Nobody disagrees on that. But from a innovation theory of value, raising the quality of life is also one of the most potent instruments for development. Because without a highly skilled, healthy, participatory population, you are limited in your aspiration for development. And this is perhaps one of the biggest devastations of the type of neoliberalism we're in. The fact that even in the heartland of capitalism, it has made life uncertain. And it makes life uncertain when you shorten the planning horizon of the average citizen, of the average family unit. It has implications. It has implications towards the nurturing and the formation of the broad-based human capabilities. When you start putting education through the market, out of reach of the population, when in Britain now, tuition fees can go up as much as £9,000 a month, you're reverting to making quality education the privilege of the rich. You're entrenching and widening in a way that we have not seen. The 20th century was a progressing in the opposite direction through widening class rifts. And that is a serious constraint to how a system of innovation can develop. So if we look at those other two statistics, I'll leave it in your front. We've seen this before. The remarkable case here is Brazil. It has bucked the trend. The other remarkable case is South Africa, because one would have thought that moving from racial legislation of disenfranchisement, by that very fact, we would have reduced inequality. We've got Human Development Index for the BRICS. Now, this is the final slide. Do we have a rupture or convergence of the BRICS within the national system of innovation? Well, we have China emerged from a closed system, and in just 3 decades, that's nothing, has become the second largest economy in the world. In terms of dynamism, incredibly dynamic. High growth rates of the Indian economy, we know, I mean, has sustained 7 to 8% over at least 2 decades. Russia was devastated in the 90s, we know, but it's forgotten now because it's growing and growing fast. And still, if you look at patent data, it's still benefiting from a technological capacity which was built in the previous incarnation. South Africa is not doing so well, but still, even at 2% growth rate, you mentioned 2% growth rate in Europe, and they're incredibly envious. And Brazil, which is addressing growth, development, and inequality, well, that's very dangerous. Because that might almost be seen as a third way, a version of a third way. Nothing wrong about it, given the context we're in. There are learning effects between the BRICS. But I do believe that a retreat from this extreme neoliberalism will entrench again further a more acceptable capitalist mode of innovation. Thanks very much.
Obrigado, Dr. Marcelo. Eu passo agora para o Miguel Rosa, diretor dessa instituição.
Eu vou fazer algumas considerações gerais, depois tratar do caso do Brasil e talvez dar alguns exemplos positivos. Mas o quadro do Brasil, no que diz respeito à tecnologia, é negativo. Não é positivo. E o presente é mais negativo do que o passado, quanto ao desenvolvimento ao longo do tempo, com exceções. Mas, de qualquer modo, eu gostaria de fazer alguns comentários. Um deles tem a ver com algumas exposições anteriores, em que a ciência se viu fortemente ao longo dos séculos o paradigma da física estabelecida no século XVII. O determinismo newtoniano teve uma influência gigantesca, inclusive em outras áreas do conhecimento, incluindo a economia. A ideia de prever o que vai acontecer, etc. A questão tecnológica tem uma abordagem muito referida da economia schumpeteriana, onde a questão tecnológica tem um papel central, etc. Mas também no marxismo há uma certa antropologia marxista, do Marx, não dos marxistas, aonde a questão da evolução humana, a própria construção do homem, tem a ver com a sua luta para superar o meio ambiente. E isto é desenvolver tecnologia. Entretanto, vivemos um período onde há uma mudança. O paradigma da física perde espaço para o paradigma da biologia. Ou seja, olharem a nomenclatura de técnicas computacionais contemporâneas, vocês vão ver os algoritmos genéticos, as redes neurais, assuntos com uma influência nítida da biologia. A física perde espaço. Tanto é que a preocupação maior hoje com a segurança do ser humano, face à ciência, é a genética, muito bem colocado aqui na nossa discussão. Há poucas décadas era a questão nuclear, era a radioatividade. Mesmo com o acidente de Fukushima no Japão, a questão nuclear não é o centro da preocupação com o desenvolvimento da ciência e de sua aplicação, é a genética. Bem, agora há alguns mitos que eu vou comentar. Um deles, bem, antes disso, isso aí é meramente um quadro que serve para balizar o desenvolvimento, a chamada revolução tecnológica da computação, aí numa arbitrária cronologia, que não é a única, mas o que interessa aí de tudo isso é o fim da escada, é esse ponto aqui. E por acaso é objeto de um filme norte-americano, cujo nome eu esqueci, mas que está em exibição nos Estados Unidos, aliás, parece ser um absoluto fracasso. Essa questão de se vamos simular o cérebro humano tem uma implicação ética gigantesca, porque se a sua máquina tiver vontade própria, tiver sentimento, ou ela vai dominar o ser humano, ou o ser humano vai dominá-la. Aí ela será um escravo, se for dominada, o que é uma componente ética. Eu ligar meu computador, como é isso? Ele não quer ser desligado, ele quer ficar ligado, eu vou desligá-lo. Ele vai conversar comigo, não me desliga que eu estou agora ocupado. Ou ele vai mandar em mim e eu vou ser escravo. Quem mais prevê o futuro tecnológico não são os cientistas, que são os incompetentes para isso. Basta você ver que o Einstein previu que para usar a bomba nuclear contra a Alemanha, ele teria de levá-la num navio que entraria num porto e explodiria com tudo. E a bomba foi levada num único avião. Em Hiroshima e Nagasaki, bem pequenininha. Nem o Einstein preveria o que foi a bomba nuclear. Era uma vaga ideia. Quem previu coisas com certo êxito foram os literatos. Não é? Lá no passado, Francis Bacon, que era um filósofo, escreveu sobre um mundo tecnológico, onde o conhecimento serviria nas palavras dele para aliviar o pesado fardo da existência humana. E outros mais, não é? Escreveram literatura de ficção que depois se realizou às vezes. O pior para prever são os economistas. Isso é um desastre. Eu não sei o que eu estou fazendo aqui, o diabo do próximo ano. Existe uma convicção que nós vivemos numa era de grande mudança tecnológica, uma coisa incrível, etc. Não apenas eu, mas alguns outros autores dizem que não. A grande revolução tecnológica experimentada em tempos recentes foi a virada do século XIX para o século XX. Andava-se de carroça, depois de automóvel. Agora, o automóvel que eu tenho hoje, ou o automóvel que eu teria há 40 anos, é mais ou menos a mesma coisa, um motor de combustão interna ineficientíssimo. E uma alavanca ou sem alavanca, grande novidade, ter alavanca ou não ter alavanca. O volante é o mesmo volante, quer dizer, o carro é a porcaria que foi feita há 80 anos. A mudança na eletricidade, na iluminação, antes se acendia-se um lampião, depois veio a eletricidade. Os computadores datam da Segunda Guerra Mundial. O satélite artificial é de 1957, o Sputnik. Quer dizer, a grande realização está lá atrás. Vivemos num momento para a população de monotonia tecnológica. Temos cada vez computadores mais rápidos, incrivelmente pequenos, mas são computadores. Eu sou do tempo que usava uma régua de cálculo. Todo estudante de engenharia tinha um negócio enfiado no bolso, que nem eu botei isso aqui, que era a sua marca registrada. Uma porcaria de uma régua de cálculo para fazer uma contazinha toda no trabalho da nada. Um belo dia me põe um computador na frente que faz aquilo tudo numa fração de minuto e com uma precisão que a régua de cálculo jamais alcançava. Isto foi um grande salto que pessoas da minha geração sofreram. Depois, os computadores cada vez menores, mas são computadores, pequenos, grandes, médios, computadores. Tanto quanto aqueles lá, 1620 da IBM, 1230, com os quais eu comecei a trabalhar. Mas então a lâmpada elétrica para a lâmpada a querosene é uma mudança gigantesca. Como avião, não tinha avião, nem se imaginava isso. Então, a grande mudança tecnológica do mundo se deu na primeira metade do século XX, não na segunda metade nem no início do século XIX. A gente continua, há novidades, é claro. A biologia é uma novidade, não se sabe bem onde vai parar. A genética. Uma comprovação do que eu estou dizendo é você ver a mesma fotografia de um ponto da cidade em dois tempos diferentes. A primeira de cima é da praça, ali onde fica, aqui no Rio de Janeiro, a central do Brasil, para quem conhece, no fim do século XIX, início do século XX. E a segunda fotografia é da metade do século XX, antes de 1950, o mesmo local, com automóveis, etc. Então, a diferença é assim. De lá para cá, a paisagem urbana não mudou muito. Tirando a queda das torres gêmeas, e não vale contar isso, nem a destruição de Hiroshima e Nagasaki pelas bombas nucleares. Mas a paisagem urbana não muda muito da metade do século XX. Para o cidadão comum, a mudança tecnológica não é tão significativa visualmente na sua vivência diária como foi aquela que tirou as charretes e botou os automóveis, tirou o lampião a querosene, botou a lâmpada elétrica e por aí vai. Tirou a régua de cálculo, botou o computador. Há um outro equívoco, a meu ver, é a utopia de que agora o mundo é imaterial. Nós todos somos seres virtuais, com computadores que usam informação, com baixíssimo consumo energético, porque nós não precisamos nem sair de casa e usamos as comunicações. Ora, isso não é bem verdade. Os sistemas computacionais integrados gastam uma energia gigantesca, que quase nunca aparece nas estatísticas, porque não é um item, está ou no item industrial, ou no item residencial, ou no serviço, mas se vocês tiverem a informação de quanto gastam esses sistemas centrais de computação, o nosso supercomputador da COP, que eu sou o diretor, é um pesadelo energético. A conta de luz dele é uma estupidez. Nós nem conseguimos pagá-la. Precisamos de arrumar um apoio externo para pagar a conta do supercomputador. Altíssimo, porque tem que ser refrigerado também, em baixa temperatura, além do próprio consumo. Fora isso, todos nós temos 3 computadores em casa que ficam ligados o tempo todo. E mais os sistemas de stand-by automáticos de todos os aparelhos de lazer, televisão, etc. A televisão ficou muito eficiente com a nova tecnologia, mas eu que me contentava e ficava muito feliz com uma televisão de 21 polegadas, é o número máximo, a classe média, eu vou comprar uma televisão de 21 polegadas que o meu vizinho já tem. Hoje, a televisão de 21 polegadas ninguém quer. As televisões têm 50 polegadas, 60, vai ter um dia que não vai poder entrar dentro de casa do sujeito, porque a televisão é do tamanho da casa. A tecnologia é moderna, mas o uso é estúpido. Bem, então esse mundo maravilhoso da tecnologia não é tão maravilhoso. E no caso do Brasil? Bem, comparem aí as nossas exportações com as importações. Nós exportamos minério de ferro para a China, nosso parceiro do BRICS, muito, e soja. Olha o valor por tonelada dessas duas coisas. Compara com os circuitos integrados que nós importamos. Eis a diferença da tecnologia. Há exceções no Brasil importantes, a indústria aeronáutica brasileira, né? Embraer, a Petrobras, a indústria de petróleo, a Embrapa na área agrícola e algumas outras. Hoje mesmo eu discuti há pouco com um colega que precisa comprar para integrar um ônibus híbrido a etanol, elétrico, em vez de você fazer o ônibus andar com um motor de combustão. O motor de combustão serve para gerar eletricidade no gerador, o que economiza muita energia. E o ônibus é movido a eletricidade. O motor brasileiro, elétrico, disponível, melhor que tem, pesa 400 quilos. O motor importado para botar no ônibus pesa 50 quilos. 8 vezes o. Isso é uma indústria bem sucedida que faz motores de 400 quilos estacionários. É um motor medieval. Devia ser usada para a biporta de castelos no tempo Era uma tecnologia antiga. O Brasil não é um país, tirando as exceções, bem sucedido tecnologicamente na sua economia. E as exceções foram iniciativas do Estado, como falava o Castiolato hoje pela manhã. A Petrobras ainda é estatal, embora com participação privada, mas estatal, com o controle do Estado. A Embrapa é estatal e a indústria aeronáutica foi criada pela Força Aérea Brasileira e um instituto tecnológico criado também para a Força Aérea. Aí mostra alguns setores da economia brasileira onde nós temos um déficit enorme de importação. Itens tecnológicos, não vamos entrar em detalhe, isso é apenas uma demonstração de que o Brasil não está no caminho, como, por exemplo, a China, mesmo a Índia. A Rússia é um país que vem ao contrário, ela tinha um desenvolvimento tecnológico maior no passado, com mudança de sistema político. E a África do Sul é parecida com o Brasil. O Brasil tem excesso de burocracia e falta de engenheiros. Tem um famoso escritor brasileiro, chamado Lima Barreto, que escreveu um livro sobre um personagem, Policarpo Quaresma, que é ficção, mas esse Policarpo Quaresma, no século XIX, fala a seguinte frase: esses sistemas de leis, posturas, códigos, tornam uma tortura um instrumento de opressão das pessoas, cerceador da iniciativa. Isso é perfeitamente verdadeiro hoje. Um advogado do governo ganha aproximadamente 8 vezes o que ganha um engenheiro. Ou um cientista que tiver alguma função, em geral, na universidade. Foram criados sistemas de incentivo ao desenvolvimento tecnológico, à inovação, mas a legislação existente no Brasil é inibidora das iniciativas. O Estado brasileiro é engessado pelos advogados, que ficam riquíssimos com os problemas que têm que ser resolvidos nas demandas judiciais. a todo momento no Brasil há um enterramento de alguma coisa, há muita dificuldade de realização das obras. Para mostrar as exceções, eu vou ser um pouco provinciano e falar dessa instituição, aqui, a COP. Essa é a COP, é apenas as áreas da engenharia que são desenvolvidas aqui, quase todas, é o principal centro de pós-graduação em pesquisa em engenharia é a COP, do Brasil. Aqui algumas áreas com as suas atividades, eu vou passar muito rápido sobre isso, porque não interessa esses detalhes. Ainda áreas interdisciplinares, laboratórios, instalações, número de doutores, formação de estudantes, publicações científicas e técnicas, etc. Existe uma fundação de direito privado associada à COP, por iniciativa dos seus professores, que atinge aproximadamente um budget de 140 milhões de dólares em contratos no sistema que aí está mostrado. Existe o Ministério da Educação no Brasil, o Ministério da Ciência e Tecnologia, cujo secretário até muito pouco tempo era o nosso bom colega Antônio Elias, foi secretário do Ministério até poucos meses atrás. A COP tenta, além desses recursos que vêm do Ministério da Educação para os cursos do Ministério da Ciência e Tecnologia, contrata, através de sua fundação, chamada COPTEC, trabalhos com a indústria e com o setor privado em geral, estatal. Estamos situados no Rio de Janeiro, que é uma posição privilegiada, no sentido que existe aqui a sede de várias empresas importantes, como a própria Petrobras. Esses laboratórios trabalham para diferentes finalidades e a COP tem uma influência na sociedade, de outro modo, formando pessoas, algumas das quais, por exemplo, atual presidente da Petrobras, ministro anterior de Minas e Energia, secretário de Educação, presidente da Eletrobras, reitores desta universidade, e que tem um papel também importante no trabalho de pesquisa na área de petróleo, que aqui no Brasil a principal empresa é a Petrobras estatal. Aqui a presença do presidente da República numa inauguração na COP, de um laboratório na área do petróleo. E aqui mostra um certo afunilamento de atividades da COP, de vários departamentos, no assunto mudança climática, que é um tema importante no mundo e que o Brasil também tem que se envolver fatalmente. Temos um projeto de tecnologia verde, que não é exclusivo da COP, a ideia é a universidade se tornar um campus atento a questões ambientais, usando energias alternativas e soluções técnicas. Desenvolvemos vários trabalhos de cálculo de emissão de gás do efeito estufa e também de uso racional da floresta, evitando o desmatamento, que tem sido bem sucedido aqui no Brasil nos últimos anos. Estudamos, e já falei ontem, as emissões de gases de barragens, desmentindo um mito que as barragens seriam responsáveis por grandes emissões de gases. Não é verdade, elas emitem muito menos que uma termoelétrica. Desenvolvemos um concreto ecológico que evita a emissão de gases, substituindo materiais na composição do concreto. Trabalhamos numa pesquisa de veículos remotos submersos para inspeções de grandes populações, inclusive de barragens. Temos laboratórios modernos, atuais, Esse é um ônibus desenvolvido a hidrogênio que está rodando aqui na universidade, totalmente nacional, feito aqui na COP. Isso é um trem de levitação magnética. Esse aqui é o dono do trem. E aqui é o sistema pelo qual vai transitar o trem de levitação magnética. É um trem de baixa velocidade para um urbano, para andar a cerca de 80 km por hora. Não é como o trem magnético de Xangai, que é um trem tipo bala. A ideia é o uso urbano. Economiza muita energia porque não tem roda, flutua sobre o trilho. Biocombustível, uma outra área importante aqui no Brasil, e que mais uma vez aparece aqui uma outra visita do presidente da República, aqui a COP, como vocês veem, faz muito tempo isso, porque ele ainda tinha cabelos pretos, e eu também. Essa é uma cooperação de biodiesel enzimático, uma tecnologia alternativa desenvolvida em cooperação com a China, com a Universidade de Tsinghua. Esse aqui é o Centro Brasil-China, onde se desenvolve esse tipo de cooperação. Aqui é uma visita da presidente da República, Dilma Rousseff, aqui a COP. Este é o nosso novo laboratório de etanol de segunda geração, inaugurado há pouquíssimo tempo. Aqui é o uso de esgoto sanitário para a produção de biodiesel, que foi desenvolvido aqui também. Isso aqui é o uso de lixo para geração elétrica, também aqui, mas não é aplicável em larga escala, o que é um erro no Brasil. Isso é um projeto bem interessante, é um gerador. Isso aqui é uma fotografia, não é uma montagem do nosso laboratório, um gerador de eletricidade com ondas. Eis aqui novamente o gerador, e aqui é a instalação dele no Ceará. Esses sistemas funcionam lá no Ceará em demonstração. É um sistema fácil de entender, mas não entra em detalhe. Algum interessado quiser, poderia fazê-lo depois em particular. Eis aí o sistema funcionando numa figura. E aqui é o sistema real sendo instalado lá em Fortaleza, para dar uma ideia da dimensão do flutuador. Aqui é o nosso parque tecnológico da universidade, com participação muito grande da COP, são as instalações dele, e algumas empresas, como vocês veem, quase todas estrangeiras, que são contratadas da Petrobras e fizeram seus laboratórios aqui, junto aqui à COP. Isso aqui é um outro laboratório da GE, que vai inaugurar um parque verde, que vai ser a compensação do outro, que é muito ligado ao petróleo. E acabou.
Bom, queria agradecer ao professor Pinguelli, assim como a todos os palestrantes anteriores, doutor Helena Luiz da Linda, doutor Mário Scher, e vou passar uma tarefa difícil, porque as três apresentações, embora convergissem em alguns pontos, tiveram muitas questões diferenciadas, mas trataram de temas importantes na relação direta com os BRICS. Ao professor Jin Shu Tang, da China. Por favor, professor.
Tigoli Rosa. Thanks for inviting us to this conference. So I'm from China. I'm now in the University of Nankai, which is in the city of Tianjin. It's the north part of China and very near our capital of Beijing. So today, I think it's my pleasure to attend this kind of conference, especially in Brazil, because it's really a long distance. It takes us about 2 days to come here from China, in fact. Now the time is midnight, so I'm a little bit sleepy. But I think the topic is very important for all of us. So I will do my best to let you understand what I'm saying clearly. First of all, I think the new technology is very important, both for us, for BRICS countries and developed countries. It's concerning the new technology, maybe everyone will think of something like iPhone, iPad, but it's not all, I think. The new technology should concentrate on what we need. For us, BRIC countries, what is the common interest of all? Yeah. So I think we should concentrate to our common interests. So here, I think some problems is our common interests and and some technologies should be developed in our BRIC countries, like technology related to the environmental issues. The environmental related impact and health risks of new technology and new environmental technology, something like that. So some new technologies. Here I list some of them. Is only what I think is related to our industry and to the environmental protection or energy aspects, such as the translation of solar energy, remote controller, and fuel cell using methanol, and some new medicines, antibody from some proteins, and the new technology of electromagnetic growth, reverse laser processing technology, extension of carbon nanotube, and materials for exchange of heat and electricity. So, in fact, in China, I'd like to I would like to emphasize 2 points. One is people. Some people gave a research result that in the year of 2090, the economic body of China will become the largest in the world, even larger than the United States. I think that even this is also a good or not. This is also a distribution in China. At the same time, China is experienced very serious environmental problems. The colleagues from China has gave some discussion about this in the morning. So, for example, in the north of China now, if you go to China, a very serious problem is the air pollution in our capital, also in our city, in Tianjin. The foggy air, very dirty air, and maybe produced from the burning of coal and the car, and because many other factories were around the city. So with the development of our economy, it's the environmental problem become more and more serious and important. So I think our new technology should deal with these problems. So in the abstract of our conference, here is some word. All countries reach a comprehensive agreement of cooperation because of the transnational characteristics of the current environmental problem. That means environmental problem is not only the problems of one country, but the problems of our BRIC countries or even the whole world. So next, I would like to introduce something related to the environmental problems, the environmental impact and the health risk of new technologies. This is, I introduced this, in fact, as an example of some technologies in the area of environmental science. So, products resulting from the development of new technologies are entering our shopping carts. How do they differ from traditional products? Do they pose potential risk to our health or to the environment? As a very important example, graphene is a very important new material. It can be used in many different industries. Also, its materials can be used to produce different materials, such as fluorines, some carbon nanotubes, and 3D graphics. The application of graphene can be used in some industry, like plant making and electronic industry and some other industries. Now, because of the wide use of these kind of materials, it these materials can enter to the environment and become a kind of pollution also. For example, accumulated in the plant and even give some hazardous effect on the ecosystems. For example, to the fish, to some animals. This is some experimental evidence of the effect of the graphene. So because of the time, I will just skip some of the slides. Next is the health risk of new technology. So it includes artificial light and health, energy-saving lamp and health, X-ray full body scanner for airport security, environmental technology and risk. The new environmental technology, including the 6 parts. One is the remediation for using physical technology. And the next one is also physical-chemical technology. Can add some chemicals during the process. And the third is the chemical technology. Fourth is the biological technology using plants and microorganisms. Fifth is the ecological remediation. Thank you. So I will give you some, finally, I think, because many different technologies, we should concentrate something important to all of us. Some suggestions here I would like to emphasize. So first, we should concentrate more on the environmental problems, not only economy. I think economy is important, but with the development economy, environmental problem arise. This is one thing I should, in detail, maybe I suggest if we can set up something like a center in the copper, not in BRICS, like a center for environmental science and climate change, something like that. So next is the for the research of the environmental issues. We should develop a fund in future. It can be used for the research of the environmental problems among the BRIC countries. The third, I think if we want to do something together, we should do more exchange among our countries. Such as we can develop some students exchange program, and third, we can also in future we can plan some conference related more on the environmental issues. Because this conference, I think, is much many of the scientists is the research on the economy, not environmental problems. I think we can have a conference to discuss mainly environmental issues next time. Maybe if you like, the conference can be in Tianjin, your university, or in other countries in China in future. Finally, so I think Brazil is a very beautiful country. So what I remember Brazil is the tropic forest in the world. It's very famous. I always watch TV and about the tropic forest in Brazil. So I hope we can protect the tropic forest as a result of our conference, and I can come back again and see the tropic forest next time, because this time I have no time to see it. Thank you.
Bom, eu queria agradecer a todos os conferencistas, doutora Helena Gris-Galinda, doutor Maracherry. Infelizmente, o doutor Pingueri está indo para a China agora e teve que se ausentar após a sua apresentação, e o doutor Jin Shun Tang, na China. Creio que esse painel, vários aspectos foram abordados. Eu, na verdade, em geral, sou mais rigoroso com o tempo. Mas quando os conferencistas vieram dos seus países, não daria apenas 10, 15 minutos, porque eles não teriam tempo de exposição. Eu acho que isso enriquece o debate. Peço, por isso, desculpas aos coordenadores por ter me estendido demais no tempo. Mas fica uma questão que eu acho que perpassou, e aí eu vou encerrar, a todos os debates, que, embora não tenha sido tratada na dimensão que deveria. Se nós vamos criar sistemas de inovação, vamos avançar nas perspectivas ambientais, vamos nos relacionar com a questão da genética, especialmente olhando a questão ética e todo o procedimento ético que o cientista deve observar na sua relação com a sociedade pelo interesse social, tem um ponto que é fundamental, está cada vez mais na pauta internacional, e se nós não nos atentarmos agora, de novo, os países, como os nossos em desenvolvimento, vão ficar, nesta corrida tecnológica, um passo atrás, que é a questão relacionada à propriedade industrial. Mais uma vez, o tema da propriedade industrial aparece como um processo de acerramento do ativo, portanto, é uma mercadoria, a patente, ela não é simplesmente um direito do inventor, e aí ele desenvolveu e despendeu o recurso, o direito da empresa. Na verdade, tem por trás todo um processo de valorização do seu capital, e se nós não tratarmos na dimensão que deve ser tratada dessa questão, daremos um passo atrás. Segundo, na área de serviços e nas barreiras técnicas, nos acordos internacionais que estão sendo impostos. Acho que são dois temas que os países dos BRICS devem atentar, devem se relacionar, embaixador Samuel, para que a gente possa, de fato, ter um processo de desenvolvimento que capitaneie dois artigos importantes que, em geral, são mal lidos dentro do TRIPS, que é o artigo 7º e 8º, que diz o seguinte: por interesse social, as leis podem ser construídas dentro da ótica do interesse público interno. Traduzindo, os interesses sociais devem estar certamente acima daquilo que é o interesse da reprodução direta do processo de concentração a nível geral. Construir sistemas de inovação é muito importante, trabalho nisso diretamente dentro do governo federal. Mas apropriar isso para a sociedade talvez seja um processo que nos ajude a reduzir as nossas desigualdades de forma muito mais efetiva. Dito isso, agradeço a todos, desculpe, coordenador, pelo tempo. Achei importante que todos pudessem fazer as suas exposições livres, foram muito ricas, e fica, de novo, o convite do professor Tang para que a gente faça uma conferência sobre a questão ambiental na China e, se possível, na cidade do professor. Muito obrigado, boa tarde.
A comissão gostaria de agradecer mais uma vez aos patrocinadores, em nome do BNDES, da Caixa, do Ministério do Planejamento, do Governo Federal, da Odebrecht e da Sinergia.